The rain-slicked streets of Seattle gleamed under the sodium glow of streetlights, but up here, on the rooftop of the Cascade Creative Agency, the world felt still. Elias Navarro, a graphic designer with a decade of quiet devotion, stood frozen, his heart hammering as he watched his boss, Cassandra Blake, lean against the railing. Her silhouette, sharp, unyielding, yet impossibly beautiful, cut against the city's skyline, and for the first time in 10 years, she was looking at him like he was more than just an employee. Elias had loved Cassandra in secret since the day he walked into her office, a nervous 22-year-old clutching a portfolio of half-baked designs. She'd been 25 then, already a legend in the advertising world. Cold, brilliant, and untouchable, with a reputation for reducing interns to tears and clients to awe. He'd spent a decade orbiting her, memorizing the way her brow furrowed over a bad pitch, the rare laugh she let slip during late-night brainstorming sessions, the way her fingers tapped impatiently on her desk when she thought no one was watching. Tonight, though, something was different. The agency had just landed a $1 million contract with a tech giant, and the team had celebrated with champagne and music in the office below. Elias had stayed late, as always, tweaking a logo that didn't need tweaking, when Cassandra had called him up to the rooftop. "Navarro," she'd said, her voice clipped but softer than usual. "We need to talk." Now, standing under the stars, he felt the weight of those words. "What's this about, Cass?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He rarely used her nickname, and it felt like crossing a line. She turned, her gray eyes catching the moonlight. "You've been here 10 years, Elias. 10 years, and I've never once asked you why you stay." The question hit like a punch. Why did he stay? Through the late nights, the impossible deadlines, the way she'd dismiss his ideas only to circle back to them later as if they were hers? Because every time she walked into a room, his world tilted. Because her rare moments of kindness, a quiet good work or a fleeting smile, were worth more to him than any promotion. Because he was in love with her, and saying it out loud would ruin everything. "I stay because this place matters," he said, dodging the truth. "The work we do, it's bigger than me." Cassandra's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Don't lie to me, Elias. You're too good for that." His breath caught. She stepped closer, her heels clicking softly on the concrete. The air between them felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. "I've seen the way you look at me," she said, her voice low, almost dangerous. 10 years, and you've never said a word. Why? Elias's mind raced. He could lie again, brush it off, keep the walls intact. But something in her gaze, vulnerable, unguarded, made him reckless. "Because you're my boss," he said, his voice raw. "Because you're Cassandra Blake, and I'm just me. Because saying it would mean losing you." The silence that followed was deafening. Cassandra's expression didn't change, but her eyes softened, and for the first time, Elias saw something flicker there. Something that wasn't control or calculation. She reached out, her fingers brushing his, and the world narrowed to that single point of contact. "Then why," she whispered, "does it feel like I'm the one who's been losing?" The rooftop seemed to vanish. Elias's heart thudded so loudly, he was sure she could hear it. Before he could process her words, she leaned in, and her lips met his, a soft, tentative kiss that felt like the collapse of every wall he'd built over 10 years. It was midnight, and the world was falling apart in the best way possible. The next morning, Elias sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen, the logo he'd been tweaking now a blur. The kiss replayed in his mind, vivid and impossible. Had it really happened? Had Cassandra Blake, the woman who'd built an empire on discipline and distance, Kissed him on a rooftop under the Seattle stars? His phone buzzed, snapping him out of it. A text from her. Meet me in my office. Now, his stomach twisted. Was this regret? Was she about to fire him? To rebuild the walls he'd thought had crumbled? He walked to her office, each step heavier than the last, and knocked. Come in, she called, her voice as crisp as ever. Cassandra sat behind her desk, her silver-streaked hair pulled back, her suit impeccable. But there was a crack in her armor, a slight flush in her cheeks, a nervousness in the way her fingers tapped the desk. Last night, she began, then stopped, as if searching for words she rarely used. Last night was unexpected. Elias nodded, unsure if he could trust his voice. Yeah, for me too. She stood, pacing to the window that overlooked the city. I don't do this, Elias. I don't let people in. This company, this life, it's all I've got. But you, she turned, her eyes locking onto his. You've been here every day seeing me. Not the CEO, not the brand. Me. Her words hit harder than the kiss. Elias had always thought his love was one-sided, a quiet ache he'd carry forever. But now, standing in her office, he saw the truth. Cassandra had been watching him too. Maybe not in the same way, maybe not with the same intensity, but she'd seen him, and that was enough to unravel him. I don't know what this means, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I know I don't want to pretend it didn't happen. Elias took a step closer, his heart pounding. Then don't. Let's figure it out. Together. For a moment, they just stood there, the space between them electric with possibility. Then her phone rang, shattering the moment. She glanced at it, her expression hardening. It's the board, she said, her voice slipping back into CEO mode. We'll talk later. As Elias left her office, his mind was a storm of hope and fear. He'd spent 10 years loving her in silence. And now, with one kiss, everything had changed. But change was dangerous, and Cassandra Blake was not a woman who surrendered control easily. Whatever came next, Elias knew one thing. There was no going back. The days that followed were a tightrope walk. Elias went through his work at Cascade Creative with mechanical precision, designing ad campaigns and tweaking fonts. But his mind was elsewhere. On the rooftop, on Cassandra's lips, on the fragile promise of later. She hadn't mentioned the kiss again, and her demeanor in meetings was as icy as ever, her focus razor-sharp on budgets and client pitches. But there were moments, fleeting glances across the conference room, a brush of her hand when passing him a file, that told Elias the midnight kiss wasn't a dream. The agency was buzzing with the new tech contract, a high-stakes campaign for a sustainable energy startup called Lumora. Cassandra had assigned Elias to lead the creative direction, a role he'd quietly craved for years. Don't let me down, Navarro, she'd said, her tone professional but her eyes lingering on him a second too long. It was a test, he knew, not just of his skills but of their unspoken connection. Late one evening, Elias was alone in the studio, surrounded by sketches and mood boards, when Cassandra appeared in the doorway. She wore a black blazer and jeans, her usual armor softened by the late hour. You're still here, she said, not a question but a statement, as if she'd known he'd be there. Couldn't sleep, Elias admitted, gesturing to the scattered designs. Lumora's brand is tricky. They want hope, but not cheesy. Authentic, but not raw. She stepped closer, scanning the sketches. This one, she said, pointing to a minimalist design with bold greens and golds. It's clean. It feels like you. The compliment caught him off guard. Like me. Cassandra's lips curved slightly. You always see the heart of things, Elias. That's why I gave you this project. He wanted to ask what else she saw in him, but the words stuck. Instead, he said, "You don't make it easy, Cass. One minute you're all business, the next he trailed off, unsure how to finish. Human? She offered, her voice dry but not unkind. She sat on the edge of the table, closer than she needed to be. I've spent my life building walls, Elias. This company, my reputation, it's all I've got. Letting someone in, it's not just hard. It's terrifying. Her honesty disarmed him. He'd always seen her as untouchable, a fortress of ambition and control. But here, in the dim light of the studio, she was just Cassandra, vulnerable, real, and scared. "You don't have to do it alone," he said softly. "I've been here, Cass. I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, she looked like she might lean in again, might let the walls crack further. But then her phone buzzed, and the moment slipped away. "I have a call with Tokyo," she said, standing. "Don't stay too late." As she left, Elias felt the weight of her words. She was trying, in her own way, to let him in. But the agency, the board, the relentless pace of their world, it was a machine that didn't stop for feelings. And Elias couldn't shake the fear that their moment on the rooftop was a fluke, a crack that would seal itself shut. The next week, the Lamora campaign hit a snag. The client rejected the initial pitch, calling it uninspired, and the board was breathing down Cassandra's neck. Elias watched her in meetings, her calm facade hiding a storm he could sense. She was harder on the team, snapping at small mistakes, and Elias felt the distance between them growing again. One night, after a brutal day of revisions, Elias found her in the break room, staring at a cold cup of coffee. "You okay?" he asked, leaning against the counter. She didn't look up. "They want my head, Elias. The board. They think I'm slipping." He frowned. "Slipping? You just landed Lamora. You're the reason this agency exists." She laughed, a bitter sound. "And yet, one bad pitch and they're ready to replace me. 10 years of building this place, and it's never enough." Elias wanted to reach for her, to pull her out of the spiral, but he hesitated. Instead, he said, "You're enough, Cass. More than enough." Her eyes met his, and for a moment the mask slipped. "You really believe that, don't you?" "I've believed it for 10 years, he said, his voice steady. She stood, closing the distance between them. "You're too good for this place," she murmured. "Too good for me." Before he could protest, she kissed him again. This time fierce, desperate, like she was drowning and he was air. Elias kissed her back, his hands finding her waist, the world fading to nothing but her warmth, her pulse, her breath. When they pulled apart, her eyes were wet, but she didn't look away. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered, "but I want to try." Elias's heart soared, but the moment was cut short by a knock on the door. It was Priya, the project manager, her face grim. "Cass, we've got a problem. Lamora's pulling out." Cassandra's expression hardened, the CEO snapping back into place. "Get the team in the war room. Now." As she strode out, Elias followed, his mind racing. The kiss, the confession, it was real, but so was the chaos threatening to pull them apart. He'd waited 10 years for her to see him. He wasn't about to let her slip away now. The war room was a battlefield of egos and exhaustion. Papers littered the table. Laptops glowed with half-finished presentations, and the team's voices overlapped in a cacophony of panic. Cassandra stood at the head of the room, her presence commanding despite the strain in her eyes. Elias watched her, torn between admiration and worry. Lumra's threat to pull out was a death knell for the agency's reputation and for Cassandra's career. "We need a new pitch by tomorrow," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "Something bold, something that screams Lumra's vision. Elias, you're leading creative. What you got?" All eyes turned to him. He stood, his sketches in hand, and pitched a campaign centered on human connection. Real stories of people impacted by sustainable energy, shot in gritty, authentic style. "It's not just about the tech," he said. "It's about the lives it changes." Cassandra nodded, her expression unreadable. "Good. Run with it. Everyone else back him up. We don't sleep until this is done." The team scattered, and Elias stayed behind, catching her arm as she headed for the door. "Cass, you need to rest. You're running on fumes." She pulled away, but not harshly. "I don't have that luxury, Elias. Not now." He wanted to argue, to tell her she didn't have to carry the world alone. But the fire in her eyes stopped him. Instead, he poured himself into the campaign, working through the night, fueled by coffee and the memory of her kiss. By dawn, they had a pitch raw, emotional, and unlike anything the agency had done before. The Lumora meeting was a blur. Elias presented, his voice steady despite the stakes, while Cassandra watched from the sidelines, her silence louder than any critique. When he finished, the room was quiet. Then the Lumora CEO, a woman named Narration, stood and clapped. "This," she said, "is what we wanted. You've got the contract." The team erupted in cheers, but Elias's eyes found Cassandra's. She gave him a small, proud nod, and his chest tightened. They'd done it. Together. Later, in her office, Cassandra poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one to Elias. "You saved us," she said simply. "We saved us," he corrected, clinking his glass against hers. "You trusted me to lead. That's not nothing." She smiled, a real one this time, and sat beside him on the leather couch. "I don't trust easily," she admitted, "but you make it hard not to." The air between them felt alive again, like it had on the rooftop. Elias set his glass down, his hand finding hers. "Cass, whatever this is, us. It's worth fighting for. I've waited 10 years. I can wait longer if you need me to." She shook her head, her fingers tightening around his. "I'm done waiting. I'm done being scared." This time, when they kissed, it wasn't desperate or fleeting. It was slow, deliberate, a promise sealed in the quiet of her office. But as they pulled apart, a shadow crossed her face. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice low. "The board's been looking for a reason to push me out. This win buys us time, but they're not done." Elias frowned. "Why? You're the best thing this agency has." She laughed softly, but it was tinged with bitterness. "I'm a woman in a man's world, Elias, and I'm different. I've never fit their mold. They've been waiting for me to slip." The weight of her words settled over him. Cassandra wasn't just fighting for the agency. She was fighting for her place in a world that didn't always want her. And now, with their relationship blooming, the stakes were higher. If the board found out, they'd use it against her. "Then we fight back," Elias said, his voice fierce. "Together." She looked at him, her eyes searching his. "You do that? Risk everything for me?" "I've been risking everything for you since the day I met you," he said, and the truth of it hung heavy in the air. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The Lumora campaign launched to rave reviews, and the agency's reputation soared. But behind closed doors, the board's pressure on Cassandra intensified. Elias overheard whispers, talk of optics and stability, code for their discomfort with her leadership. He wanted to confront them, to defend her, but she stopped him. "Not yet," she said. "We need to be smart." Their relationship grew in stolen moments. A coffee shared in the break room, a late-night walk through Pike Place Market, her hand brushing his as they passed the fish stalls. Each touch, each glance, was a rebellion against the walls they'd both built. But Elias couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. One evening, as they worked late on a new client brief, Cassandra's phone buzzed with an email from the board. She read it, her face paling. "They're calling an emergency meeting tomorrow," she said. "They want to discuss my future with the agency." Elias's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means they're making their move," she said, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "And we need to be ready." The emergency board meeting loomed like a storm cloud. Elias spent the night in his apartment, pacing, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Cassandra had told him to stay out of it, to let her handle the board, but the idea of her facing them alone was unbearable. He'd seen her strength, her brilliance, but he'd also seen the cracks. The way her hands shook when she thought no one was watching, the way her voice caught when she spoke of losing everything. By morning, he'd made up his mind. He arrived at the agency early, slipping into the conference room before the board arrived. Cassandra was already there, reviewing notes, her posture rigid. She looked up, startled. "Elias, what are you doing here?" "I'm not letting you do this alone," he said, his voice firm. "You've fought for this place for 10 years. Let me fight with you." Her eyes softened, but she shook her head. "This isn't your battle. If they see us together, they'll use it against me." "Then let them," he said, stepping closer. "I'm not hiding how I feel about you. Not anymore." Before she could respond, the board members filed in, 6 men and 2 women, their faces a mix of smugness and feigned concern. The chairman, Richard Holt, a silver-haired man with a penchant for power plays, spoke first. "Cassandra, we've been discussing the agency's direction. Your leadership has been divisive." Elias's blood boiled, but Cassandra's voice was ice. "Divisive? We just landed Lamora. Richard, our profits are up 20% this quarter." Holt waved a hand. "One win doesn't erase years of concerns. Your approach, your personal style, it's not aligning with our vision." The subtext was clear. Elias couldn't stay silent. "Her approach built this agency," he said, standing. "Cassandra's the reason we're on the map. You'd be fools to push her out." The room went quiet. Holt's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Navarro, this doesn't concern you." "It concerns all of us," Elias shot back. "This agency is nothing without her." Cassandra's hand brushed his under the table. A silent thank you. She stood, her voice steady. "If you want me out, say it. But don't hide behind vague complaints. I've given everything to this company, and I'm not done yet." The meeting dragged on, a tense back and forth of accusations and defenses. By the end, the board agreed to a compromise. Cassandra would remain CEO, but under stricter oversight. It wasn't a victory, but it was a reprieve. After the meeting, Cassandra and Elias walked to a nearby cafe, the tension still clinging to them. Over coffee, she finally spoke. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, but her tone was soft. "You put a target on your back." "I'd do it again," Elias said, meeting her gaze. "You're worth it." She smiled, a rare, unguarded smile that made his heart ache. "You're impossible, you know that?" They spent the afternoon talking, not about work, but about themselves. Cassandra told him about her childhood in Chicago, the pressure to be perfect, the way she'd buried her heart to survive in a cutthroat industry. Elias shared his own story. Growing up in a small Texas town, coming out as gay to a family that didn't understand, finding solace in art. For the first time, they weren't boss and employee. They were just two people, raw and real, falling into something deeper than either had expected. But the board's shadow lingered. Over the next few days, Elias noticed changes, new protocols, more oversight, whispers among the staff. Cassandra was under a microscope, and their relationship, still fragile and undefined, was a liability. One evening, as they walked along the Seattle waterfront, she stopped, her face serious. "Elias, if this costs me the agency, I need to know you're all in," she said. "Because I'm risking everything." He took her hand, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "I'm all in, Cass. I always have been." She kissed him then, under the glow of a street lamp, and for a moment, the world felt right. But as they pulled apart, Elias saw a figure in the distance, Holt, watching from a car. His stomach sank. The board wasn't just watching Cassandra. They were watching them. The next morning, an email from Holt waited in Elias's inbox. "We need to discuss your role at Cascade." It was a trap, and he knew it. He showed it to Cassandra, who read it in silence, her jaw tight. "They're trying to divide us," she said. "If they can't get me directly, they'll go through you." "Then we don't let them," Elias said. "We fight smart. Together." Cassandra nodded, but her eyes were distant. "I need to think, Elias. Give me tonight." He agreed, but as he left her office, a knot of dread settled in his chest. He'd spent 10 years loving her in silence, and now that they were finally breaking through, the world seemed determined to tear them apart. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He sat on his balcony, the Seattle skyline a distant glow, and replayed every moment with Cassandra. The rooftop kiss, the stolen glances, the way she'd let him see her heart. But Holt's email gnawed at him. The board wasn't just a threat to her job. They were a threat to them. By morning, he'd made a decision. He'd confront Holt himself. He arrived at the agency early, finding Holt in his corner office. The chairman looked up, unsurprised. "Navarro, I figured you'd show up. What's your play, Holt?" Elias asked, his voice steady. "Cassandra's the best CEO this agency's ever had. Why are you gunning for her?" Holt leaned back, his smile cold. "It's not personal. It's business. Cassandra's unconventional. Her leadership style, her choices, they raise questions. And you, getting too close to her, aren't helping." Elias's fists clenched. "You're threatened by her because she's better than you. And if you think you can use me to hurt her, you're wrong." Holt's smile didn't waver. "Careful, Navarro. You're a good designer, but you're replaceable. She's not the only one who could lose everything." The threat hung heavy, but Elias didn't back down. "If you go after her, you go through me." He left Holt's office, his heart pounding but his resolve firm. He found Cassandra in the studio, sketching on a tablet, her face drawn. "Elias," she said, standing. "What did you do?" "I told Holt the truth," he said. "You're worth fighting for." Her eyes widened, a mix of fear and gratitude. "You're reckless," she said, but she stepped closer, her hand finding his. "And I'm glad you are." They didn't have time to say more. Priya burst in, her face pale. "Cass, the board's calling another meeting. Now, they're voting on your position." The conference room was a crucible. The board sat stone-faced, Holt at the head. Cassandra stood tall, her voice unwavering as she defended her record. 10 years of growth, countless awards, the lum or a win. Elias sat in the back, his presence a quiet rebellion. When Holt raised the issue of professional boundaries, hinting at their relationship, Cassandra didn't flinch. My personal life is irrelevant, she said. Judge me on my work, not your biases. Elias stood, unable to stay silent. Cassandra's built this agency from nothing. She's given everything, her time, her heart, her vision. If you can't see that, you don't deserve her. The room fell silent. Holt's face reddened, but before he could respond, Narration, Lumra's CEO, entered unannounced. I heard there was a meeting, she said, her voice calm but commanding. Cassandra, your team's work saved our campaign. If you're out, we're out. The board shifted uncomfortably. Holt's smile faltered. After a tense deliberation, they backed down. Cassandra would stay, no strings attached. As the room cleared, Mara pulled Elias aside. You too, she said, smiling. You're something special. That night, Cassandra and Elias stood on the rooftop again, the city alive below them. The air was cool, but her hand in his was warm. You didn't give up on me, she said, her voice soft. Never will, he replied, pulling her close. She looked at him, her eyes bright with something new. Hope. 10 years, Elias. I wasted so much time being afraid. No more wasting, he said, and kissed her, the midnight sky their witness. They weren't naive. The board would watch them, the industry would talk, and their love would always be a risk. But as they stood there, wrapped in each other, Elias knew it was worth it. They'd fought for this, for each other, and won. The walls had collapsed, and what remained was a love built on 10 years of silence, now free to speak. Years later, they'd tell their story, not just of a kiss that changed everything, but of a fight for authenticity, for courage, for a love that refused to stay hidden. Cascade Creative thrived under Cassandra's leadership, with Elias by her side, their partnership a beacon for others. And every midnight, on that rooftop, they'd return, not to hide, but to remember. Love, when fought for, could move mountains.